Parish, Woliwa Village, Siranko District. I'm involved in a mixed farming whereby we grow bananas, coffee, we have avocados, jackfruit, and we are rearing some animals and chicken. We had the problem. Oliver Juliet from Ujibuji Parish, Woliwa Village, Siranko District. I'm involved in a mixed farming whereby we grow bananas, coffee, we have avocados, jackfruit, and we are rearing some animals and chicken. We had the problems in getting some methods of planting or growing. We had not known then how we can maintain our crops and trees. Sometimes we are cutting them for firewood, but now we have learned that trees are of great importance. But there were visitors who came and taught us about the program. We accepted and I walked with them around the mapping our garden, and we have benefited as we started to get something. We asked for more, for helpers, fertilizers, so that we can improve on in our gardens. It is a good initiative to us. We are going to learn that we should not cut trees, but we should maintain for the good of our living and our other people. We managed to buy some little fertilizers and paid the workers who helped us to cultivate that side, and even slashing some are still there, but it was little. But at least we bought some little fertilizer, which is not enough. We have many gardens. I feel that you should move around and educate more. As we have started, we shall also help to educate our neighbors the good things we are getting from Solidarity.
Excuse me and apologies for the technical hiccup as we were starting out. The video that was running is of a smallholder farmer. That is Namalome. Namalome comes from Uganda, and she plants coffee, and she also practices agroforestry. So we thought it best to begin, or rather to introduce this session and sort of put context in what we are going to be discussing today. So welcome to the session. We're going to delve deeper into the case study that Namalome was trying to portray in this video, just about the opportunities that are there for carbon incentives, particularly when you're talking about smallholder farmers in the East African, in East Africa, sorry. My name is Sweeney Binsari, and I work for Solidaridad, East and Central Africa. I'm the regional climate change and excuse me, natural resource management lead, and I'm going to be your moderator for this session. So without much time, and we've taken a lot of time just to kick off, and once again, apologies for that. To help us kickstart this conversation, we have distinguished guests that I will invite to the stage. So that's we delve a bit deeper into what Namalome was trying to discuss with us this morning. I would like to introduce Ms. Rachel Wanyoike. Ms. Rachel Wanyoike is the Managing Director of Solidaridad East and Central Africa. A round of applause as she comes up. Thank you. I would also like to invite to the stage Ms. Marguerite Muisbelt. I hope I'm pronouncing it well, Marguerite. Karibu sana. Marguerite is a founder and account manager, partnerships for Acorn, and she works for Rabobank. Next on stage is Mr. Aaron Werike. Aaron is a Senior Climate Finance Officer from the Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development from Uganda. And last but not least, we want to invite Dr. Samuel Ogala. Dr. Ogala is the Senior Climate Change Advisor from the African Union Commission. Let's give a round of applause to our panelists again. So to start us off is Ms. Wanyoike, who will share a case study on an ongoing project in both Uganda and Kenya, what we are actually doing with the farmers across East Africa when it comes to carbon, the carbon markets and carbon incentives. So Ms. Wanyoike, would you like to take us through that as your presentation is coming up? Just feel free to talk through that. I think there's a mic. Yeah, you have mics.
So do I wait for the presentation? I just start?
Yeah, you can just start.
So as you've all heard, thank you for joining Solidaridad and our partners today, ACON, Africa Union, and also the government of Uganda for this session. My name is Rachel Wanyoike. I'm the Managing Director for Solidaridad in Eastern Central Africa, however based in Nairobi, Kenya. And with regards to the case study that we are looking at today, I think this particular session is titled Unlocking Carbon Incentive Opportunities for Smallholder Farmers. And that is pretty much the work that Solidaridad has been trying to do to improve potential opportunities for our smallholder farmers on the ground. So just a little bit of information about Solidaridad. We are a global organization. We are a not-for-profit civil society working primarily in agriculture and agribusiness as our entry point. Any links or connections to climate, water, renewable energy always come as an intersection between what that means for smallholder farmers and the agriculture sector. We are over 50 years old globally, and we've been working in facilitating the establishment and creation of sustainable and inclusive supply chains and also trade. So our core business is really trying to look at those strategic commodities, value chains that link to economic growth, that support sustainable livelihoods, that are triggers for improved income, and that really drive sort of the north to south interaction within different value chains, but also how that affects also local systems as well. So whether it's local food systems or just general income generating activities, that's kind of the work that we're doing. We're currently globally in about 52 countries, in 7 regional expertise centers, which is what we call our regions. So I'm one of the regional expertise centers. And currently we also are 1,000 staff. Oh, brilliant, it's on now. So I have already talked about this slide, so we can actually jump through. Yeah, is that okay? So we can actually move to the next one. Great, okay. So if we zero in now on Eastern Central Africa, we work in various commodities and the work that we're doing. So at the moment, we're working out of 4 country offices, including the Uganda office, which leads to the Uganda project, but also in various commodities. As I mentioned, some of them have more of an external focus. So we do actually work in specific commodities that go towards export, but also we also work on different commodities that are more focused on local systems. So when we're thinking about farm resilience and what we're doing in our smallholder farmers, we really consider and take into account that catalyzing the agricultural transformation that everybody's talking about, whether it's this climate summit or AGRF currently happening in Tanzania, really is going to be driven by a change in farming practices. And the way that we look at it is that it's going to have to take into account different core dimensions. So if you're taking into account the clear strategic plans that are coming out of this process, what's been put in place, hopefully some of the actions that also come out of the summit itself, we're looking at the different market-driven opportunities that we can develop, and you're looking at some of the partnerships like with ACON and what we're doing actually with the market. you're looking at the critical enablers that we're trying to drive. So if we're really trying to mobilize some of these like changes in practice, it really focuses on smallholder farmers themselves. You're looking at taking a more pragmatic approach about how you deliver the work that we're doing, and you'll see that in the pilots about how we have framed the carbon incentives also for smallholder farmers to be able to create that uptake also on platforms like Acorn. When you're looking also at the enabling policies that need to be put in place to actually drive these enablers to be able to benefit from the market. And lastly, also you're looking at moving towards scaling. So pilots are great, and as a development sector actors, we do love a lot of pilots, but really moving towards scaling, replication of actually really clear models. And as you can see, the climate adaptation finance flows would be essential for that. Being able to drive some of those dimensions really requires investment, it requires uptake from different stakeholders, and it requires a collaborative effort. And it's from that process that we thought that actually linking our smallholder farmers to carbon markets with platforms such as Acorn would be very essential to actually create the change that we want to see on the ground. So the case study that we're looking at is really working with around agroforestry. So shade trees that coffee farmers were already going to plant anyway in their course of business. How can you then use that as an opportunity for them to actually gain some level of incentive? So we're working with farmers in a space that they're already in. So we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. And then we're trying to encourage them to see all aspects of their farming as a business, driving real stakeholder changes in mindset around really thinking of farming as a business itself. So it's not just the commodity that you're selling, but it's other activities within your farm. So I think most of the people will have some general ideas about why smallholder farmers have these barriers to entry, especially when you look at the carbon markets itself. So, and there's always that challenge that, you know, how can we actually prove that they're benefiting directly? How are we proving that whatever climate finance is generated, whatever carbon credits are generated, whatever opportunities arise, actually go towards the farmers? So when we were starting this process, obviously there were some key barriers that we were looking at around the high certification costs. There was talk around the high MRV costs, and also the lack of access to fair payments. The carbon market sometimes can be a wild, wild west. So really trying to think about how to collaborate with very strategic partners that almost can create that safe pair of hands approach for the farmers. So collaborating with platforms such as Acorn allowed us to actually do that. So as the local implementing partner, and this actually case study is from Uganda, but you later see we expanded this into Kenya as well. There was some initial stages to the process. So in terms of the process overview, you have it highlighted above, and where we're looking at the upfront investment costs. So the eligibility and additionality of the projects and looking at the beneficiaries, really thinking about the mapping, the farmers that you're dealing with, really creating those farmer profiles, integrating with the different work that we do. And then looking at creating those baselines. Now when we've determined the location that we needed to be in, really what are we starting with? So we're able to at least try and measure our impact as we go along. In addition to that, we also had the farmer onboarding and also the other costs in terms of developing what we were calling the project councils, which is actually the stakeholder approach that we're using to engage within the community. So how are we also interacting with the partners and the beneficiaries that we're actually working with? So our entry point, to be able to ensure scale, replication, to be able to integrate peer-to-peer models, was really trying to work with the cooperatives. So really working with key strategic cooperatives and then developing the farmer profiles from the farmers working within the cooperatives themselves. So as part of our farmer profiling process, we are also giving out sort of farmer IDs, which is basically the life of the farmer within Solidaridad. It's able to handle all of the data we've already collected, from personal farmer data, from information about their geographical location, their farm profile itself, but also in terms of that as well, also integrating the polygon, so eventually we can actually identify the specific farmer we're working with. And to date, we've been working with, the target was 1,000 farmers in this particular pilot, and we were able to profile and establish a clear business case that you'll see later on got funded. So, and we did have some CRUs, some carbon removal units that were generated within 2021, and Marguerite herself also had the opportunity to come and hand out some checks to our farmers. So it's been so far a successful pilot process, and we're now trying to scale it. In terms of the actual business case findings that we found is that with regards to the farmers that we're working with, you also need to also take into account the level of effort and the investment they require to be able to actually deliver on their commitments. And like looking at aspects around labor and inputs and how that affects actual farm revenues as well. So as part of the more elevated scale process, we are taking some of those elements and findings into account when we think about some of the models we're putting in place to actually do activities including pre-financing our farmers to be able to deliver and working with them in different aspects. So how can we actually equip them not only with the skills and the knowledge, but also give them access to be able to deliver as well. So it's having that as part of the process. So in terms of the numbers, at the end of the day, everyone always asks, is this worth it? What is the incentive? How would you encourage your farmers? And for us, we do see that there is a growing incentive around it. The core thing, however, that we do like to stress, especially within the work that we're doing in our partnership with ACON as well, is that the incentive is not going to necessarily lift you out of poverty. The goal is not to abandon your agriculture business to work in carbon markets. The idea that this is the top up to the work that you are already doing, especially within the value chains you're working in. So as you're working in different commodities, as you're working as a coffee farmer or a tea farmer, you're still gaining your income from those processes, and this is now sort of the cherry on the top. So it's using that as a combined approach and not necessarily saying that this is going to be the thing that's going to necessarily revolutionize your entire business. So it's just trying to think about how we can elevate some of these incentives in a way that they actually create real opportunity. And so far, in terms of the findings we've had, there is that opportunity, and there's also opportunity to scale. So in terms of some of the lessons learned, we're looking at really creating that meaningful benefit within the farm itself. So not only income, but also productivity. The integration of climate smart practices within the work that you do should just be part of your business as usual. It's now no longer nice to have, it's actually an essential thing. So really creating that business case is essential. We're also looking at the scale opportunities and how it would actually differ from farm to farm. So obviously we've seen clear successes in some starting points, in some that has been slower. So really trying to navigate that approach to understand what actual mechanisms are required to create those drivers to work. Really thinking around the climate investment and financing portion of it, and also really creating that ongoing monitoring and verification process to ensure that we are actually doing the work that we say that we're going to be doing. Yeah. So there are also various other non-carbon benefits, just in terms of resilience itself. There's also building that capacity also within the communities that we work with. We're also working within the agroforestry systems. Also, Kenya has a very high target in terms of what we're doing in terms of planting trees. So really trying to see how that can work in terms of reducing emissions, and ultimately now also some of the carbon payments portion of it. So our upscaling of this process is actually evident from a program that we've actually was successful in getting a grant for, which is right here. So from climate victims to climate heroes, where we have various partners within this program. So this is funded by the Dutch Dutch National Postcode Lottery. Our partners in that is Rabobank ACON, Fairfood, Ranj, and also with Solidaridad, both not only the local implementing partner, but also our Dutch entity as well. And with that, the project targets 60,000 farmers in Kenya and Uganda. And so far, we've actually managed to profile a substantial amount of them already and onboarded them onto the ACON platform, and now are working towards actually the steps to generate the CRUs themselves. And that's the kind of work that we're looking at. And within the key interventions that we're looking at within this program, we're looking at carbon farming as a driver, we're looking at carbon financing as another driver, and we're looking at carbon trade. So how do we create that connection and link within the three processes to actually end in final benefit to the smallholder farmers themselves? Great. So for me, that's for me on my part. I think also one thing to explain about the Climate Heroes program as well is that it's actually also a global program. So while Kenya and Uganda are the African entities that are actually participating, we actually have countries in Latin America as well that we're learning from as well. So they're slightly more advanced in this process. So we're also generating sort of the global lessons learned and seeing how we can pull them to the Africa context. And so far, it's been a very beneficial process. So thank you everybody for listening to the presentation, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the session.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Thank you for the insightful look on what's happening on the ground. But you mentioned something very interesting, that one of the barriers for smallholder farmers is the costs, the high certification costs, the monitoring and verification costs, and the fair payments. And to help us understand how we are trying to bridge these barriers, how we are trying to make this affordable for a smallholder farmer. And when we say a smallholder farmer in East Africa, that's a farmer who has land between 1 to 2 acres. And this is not acreage, all of it's not for cultivation. Some of it is where he has set up his houses, does other things in the same farm. So to take us through that, we'll invite Marguerite. How accessible is this carbon marketplace for a smallholder farmer? Thank you.
Yes, this one is working. Hi, everybody. I'm so honored to be here today. Thank you for inviting me and telling a little bit more about Acorn. The picture that you just last saw in your slides were actually of the payment ceremony in Uganda. And there, it kind of felt like full circle. So these farmers started planting trees a couple of years back. We as Acorn were able to measure the biomass, the growth in biomass on every individual plot. And as soon as it hit the 1 ton biomass increase or carbon increase, we were able to generate a CRU, a carbon removal unit, on behalf of the farmer, sold it to our clients. In this case, it was Microsoft. And then at that ceremony, the farmers actually got paid. So first they heard this beautiful story of planting trees, and am I going to get money out of this? And then, yes, it actually happened. So while we were on the ceremony, the farmers got their payments in their phones, and you should have seen their faces. It was like, full circle for me. So very happy to be there also. Maybe first to start off, so why is Acorn a proposition being built by a Dutch bank? And basically it's because we are also founded by farmers more than 100 years ago. And we still are a cooperative bank till today. So no shareholders, only our farmers are our owners basically. And Acorn is kind of Rabobank's contribution to combat climate change. Land degradation, food insecurity, and we focused on smallholder farmers because we believe they are hit most by current climate changes. So we wanted to provide these smallholder farmers access to the voluntary market and really try to get a really good quality credit so that we could get a high price for our buyers. But also our buyers are often very critical on quality of carbon removal units. Maybe first a little bit more about carbon removals or carbon credits, because lots of terminology going on. So this picture might shed a little bit more light on that. So currently you see at the start of the gray area is the current emissions. So what can we do to keep the emissions or make them go down and keep the strategy to become below 1.5 degrees. So you have avoidance, you have reductions, and you have removals. And removals is actually taking up carbon from the atmosphere, where avoidance and trying to reduce it kind of only makes the gray box smaller. So we need all three to realize the carbon cut, basically, so to slow down on carbon emissions. So as Acorn, we are in the removals at the bottom in the green. And how can you remove carbon from the atmosphere? By nature-based solutions or by technical solutions. So we as Acorn focus on the nature-based solutions, and we are targeting the voluntary carbon markets, so not the compliance markets. Thank you. So this is kind of a small overview of how it works. So the farmers on the left side, they start planting trees on their farms. Why trees planting? Not just for the carbon, like Rachel mentioned, but to become more climate resilient. Because planting trees improves your soil, it improves weather events like heavy rains, so your newly sowed vegetables are not washed away. The water retention goes up, so it has so much benefits. And on top of that, we think indeed we can give them a bonus by monetizing the carbon stored in those trees. But like if you can stay here, we need our local partners on the ground, like Solidaridad, because they have the network of smallholder farmers. We don't in the Netherlands. So we really need them to implement this project, tell the farmers about climate smart practices. They onboard the farmers onto our platform by mapping the polygon, so we know where to measure the biomass of each individual farmer. By making use of remote sensing techniques, we can monitor and monetize the carbon uptake. We do that every year, and we keep on doing that for 20 years after we have sold a carbon removal unit. So that's really a high quality credit, I would say. And because we can make use of remote sensing techniques, we can lower the cost. Yeah. For the sake of time, let's go on. I recognize this, the last slide from yours as well. So Acorn kind of developed this umbrella certification. So lowering the cost of certification. We do the MRV with satellite-based technologies, also cutting down the cost at scale. And also what we think is very important, because the farmers are growing the trees, so they should be rewarded with the carbon they store on their land. So 80% of every carbon removal sold flows back to the farmer. This is a little bit more technique. So here you see ground truth data collection going on, but the middle section is also like, how do we train our models? On the right, you can see all the individual plots of the farmers, so we know where to measure the biomass. And basically, it's very full transparent. So every project is registered on our website. You can zoom in actually on the little marks that you see there, and then you can, go down really to plot size. You can see farmers registered, etc. We get lots of questions about, are you able to find buyers? And yes, we can, because they are lined up basically. So the crews that we can supply them with are lower than the demands. So companies like Microsoft, they have a huge demand for carbon removal units, because they do not only want to come to net zero, but also compensate for their historical emissions. Yeah. So we do believe that the prices will go up, obviously. So in a nutshell, we as Acorn, we believe that we have really high quality carbon credits or carbon removal units, as we like to call them, on offer because of these reasons. So it's nature-based, it's a removal from the atmosphere, it's exposed, so we sell only after the carbon has already been stored in all of those trees. Very transparent, so you can see where our projects are. Traceable, we are certified by Plan Vivo. Methodology on how we calculate the crews with by making use of remote sensing techniques, also approved by Plan Vivo and 2 other external bodies. And the most important thing, I think, 80% flows back to the farmers. Yeah, and the number is higher. We've already reached 200,000 farmers. So this was, I think, a couple of weeks ago. But yeah, more over